My mom gave my dad's lifeline money to the man who ruined our whole family. The smell of disinfectant clung to my skin like a thin film. I stared at the flickering monitor beside my father's hospital bed, its green numbers dimming and brightening in the dimness like dying fireflies. Evelyn heard back from the insurance yet? A nurse pushed her medication cart past, her eyes above the blue mask filled with professional concern. I clenched the crumpled bill in my pocket, my Adam's apple bobbing, and finally shook my head. 3 days earlier, under the scorching summer sun of Houston that made steel bars burn to the touch, my father had been tying rebar on a scaffolding 30 stories high when the bamboo plank beneath his feet suddenly snapped. He fell like a withered leaf, his safety harness catching on a steel pipe at the last second, but the impact still dealt a fatal blow to his lumbar spine, a burst fracture. The surgery and subsequent rehabilitation would cost at least $120,000. I could still picture the scenes from every visit to his work site. The 50-year-old man in a sweat-soaked blue work uniform, his face tanned and peeling under the hard hat, calluses on his palms thick enough to trap gravel. Once I'd caught him sneaking painkillers he'd strained his back moving rebar the day before, but refused to take a day off for fear of losing wages. The foreman said I'll get a $500 bonus if I finish the month, he'd said, wiping sweat with a smile, cement dust embedded in the wrinkles around his eyes. Outside the emergency room, my mother had fainted from grief. When she woke up, she'd held my hand and repeated, "Evelyn, we still have that savings, your father's lifeline. Those $80,000 were my parents' retirement fund, saved over 20 years, my father risking his life high above the ground, my mother scrubbing dishes in a Chinatown restaurant, skipping countless lunches, never buying a new outfit. Stored in a credit union under my mother's name, I'd always thought it was our family's last safety net." Yesterday afternoon, I'd taken time off work to withdraw the money. The teller's words pierced my temples like ice picks. "I'm sorry, Miss Evelyn, your mother's account was fully withdrawn 3 days ago. I'd thought it was a system error until the transaction record pulled up showing the recipient, Julian Thorne, my brother." The monitor let out a soft beep, and my father's breathing quickened abruptly. I pressed the call button, my fingertips icy cold. The nurse rushed in to adjust his oxygen tube, whispering, "The patient needs surgery immediately. Any delay could lead to paralysis." I nodded, my gaze falling on my father's pale face. Unwiped tears still clung to the corners of his eyes, tears he'd shed yesterday when he'd held my hand and said, "Don't make your mother work too hard." At 7 that evening, my mother finally appeared at the ward door. She wore her favorite cream-colored trench coat, her hair neatly combed, but her eyes were swollen and red. "Mom, where's the money?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but my fingernails dug into my palm. She avoided my gaze, reaching out to smooth the blanket over my father. "How's your dad? When does the doctor say he can have surgery? I'm asking about the money." My voice dropped to a fierce whisper, anger boiling in my chest. "The bank said you transferred all the savings to Julian? Mom, that's Dad's lifeline." Yesterday afternoon, I'd taken time off work to withdraw the money. The teller's words pierced my temples like ice picks. "I'm sorry, Miss Evelyn, your mother's account was fully withdrawn 3 days ago. I'd thought it was a system error until the transaction record pulled up showing the recipient, Julian Thorne, my brother." The monitor let out a soft beep, and my father's breathing quickened abruptly. I pressed the call button, my fingertips icy cold. The nurse rushed in to adjust his oxygen tube, whispering, "The patient needs surgery immediately. Any delay could lead to paralysis." I nodded, my gaze falling on my father's pale face. Unwiped tears still clung to the corners of his eyes, tears he'd shed yesterday when he'd held my hand and said, "Don't make your mother work too hard." At 7 that evening, my mother finally appeared at the ward door. She wore her favorite cream-colored trench coat, her hair neatly combed, but her eyes were swollen and red. "Mom, where's the money?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but my fingernails dug into my palm. She avoided my gaze, reaching out to smooth the blanket over my father. "How's your dad? When does the doctor say he can have surgery? I'm asking about the money." My voice dropped to a fierce whisper, anger boiling in my chest. "The bank said you transferred all the savings to Julian? Mom, that's Dad's lifeline." My mother froze, then slowly turned around, her face set in a determination I'd never seen before. "Evelyn, Julian needed it urgently." Urgently? I couldn't believe my ears. What could be more urgent than Dad's life? Did he rack up more gambling debts or get scammed by another woman? Julian was the shame of our family. 3 years older than me, he'd been lazy and irresponsible since childhood. He'd skipped high school to gamble, getting expelled. Later, my father pulled strings to get him a job at a construction company, but he quit after less than a week, complaining it was too tiring, and pawned the site's tools for cash. I'd never forget last Christmas. He'd stumbled home drunk, followed by 2 menacing debt collectors. He owed $40,000 in gambling debts, having hawked my mother's dowry gold necklace. My father had trembled with rage, yet still handed over 6 months' worth of savings to pay it off. Meanwhile, Julian had passed out on the couch, grumbling about my father's pathetic earnings when he woke up. Obsessed with poker and quick-rich schemes, he'd cost my parents over $50,000 in debts over the years. Just a week before my father's accident, I'd spotted him outside a Houston casino, arm around a heavily made-up woman, waving a stack of cash. When he saw me, he sneered, "Smart move going to college and working, Evelyn. Not like me, I was born lucky, just waiting for my big break." At that very moment, my father had been working overtime a few miles away, enduring 104-degree heat. I'd thought my father's accident would finally wake my mother up. "It's an investment," my mother said, her voice trembling but stubborn. "Julian says he found a foolproof project. Invest now, and it'll double in a month. We'll pay for your dad's surgery and still have plenty left for retirement." "Mom," I trembled with anger. "Wake up! How many times has Julian lied to you? Dad's in the hospital risking paralysis, and you gave his lifeline to him for investment. He's my son." My mother's voice shot up, triggering a shrill alarm from the monitor. "Evelyn, how can you talk about your brother like that? He's just had bad luck. He promised me this time it'll work. For your dad, we can find another way. Borrow from relatives, apply for medical assistance." "Relatives?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Aunt Maria lent Julian $20,000 3 years ago, and she's never gotten it back. Uncle Carlos mortgaged his retirement home last year to pay Julian's gambling debts. Who else is going to lend us money? Medical assistance? Have you forgotten Dad's an undocumented immigrant? No social security, no health insurance, everything's cash only." My father had snuck into the U.S. from Mexico 20 years earlier, working under the table all these years. Hardest jobs, lowest pay. My mother washed dishes in a Chinatown restaurant. They'd scraped every penny together, and my mother's preference for sons had been etched into every detail of my childhood. When we were poor, Julian always got the eggs for growing boys. When I asked for a book, she said, "Girls don't need that much education," but bought Julian the latest game console the next day. When I wanted to go to college after high school, she cried that we couldn't afford it yet, never uttered a word of criticism when Julian dropped out and wasted money. Once I'd had a 102-degree fever, and she told me to buy medicine myself, but when Julian sprained his ankle, she took 3 days off work to nurse him. "You're the older sister, you have to let your brother have his way." Those were the words I'd heard most growing up. After college, I got a job at a design firm making $6,000 a month. After rent and living expenses, I sent $1,000 home every month, but that was a drop in the bucket for Dad's surgery. The monitor's alarm blared louder, and my father's face turned even paler. The nurse rushed back in, checked the machine, and glared at us sharply. "Please keep quiet. The patient needs rest. Your emotional outburst is affecting his vital signs." My mother's shoulders slumped, and tears finally spilled over. I took a deep breath, forcing down my anger, and apologized to the nurse. Silence returned to the ward, broken only by the monitor's monotonous tick-tock, like a countdown. "Evelyn, I had no choice," my mother said, sitting down, her voice low and exhausted. "Julian knelt and cried, said this was his last chance. If I didn't help him, he'd have to rob a bank. I can't watch my son go to jail. But you can watch Dad die?" My voice cracked. "Mom, who matters more to you? Just because he's a son and I'm a daughter, does his future count more than Dad's life? More than my feelings?" My mother didn't answer, just kept wiping her tears. As I looked at her haggard face, she seemed like a stranger. How could the woman who'd taught me to be kind and grateful become so irrational? At 1 in the morning, I sat on a bench outside the ward, scrolling through my phone contacts, desperate to borrow money, but I was already ostracized. Over the years, I'd fought with aunts and uncles countless times to stop my mother from bailing Julian out, ruining all those relationships. As for friends, I'd borrowed so much to help my family before that I couldn't bear to ask again. Just as despair overwhelmed me, my phone rang. It was Julian. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey, Evelyn." His casual, carefree voice came through, mixed with loud music and women's laughter in the background. "Mom said you were looking for me? Finally come around to investing your savings with me? I'm gonna make a killing, buy you a designer bag when I cash out." "Julian," I said through gritted teeth, struggling to keep my voice steady, "give the money back to Mom. Dad needs surgery urgently or he'll be paralyzed." "Surgery?" Julian scoffed. "Evelyn, are you stupid? That chump change won't even cover half of it. When I'm rich, I'll get him the best doctor, the nicest hospital room and thing. Right now, you should be supporting me, not holding me back." "What did you do with the money?" I shouted. "Did you gamble it away again or get scammed? It's none of your business." Julian's voice turned irritable. "The money's invested. I can't get it back. If you're so worried about Dad, find the money yourself. Stop bothering me. I'm busy." He hung up, leaving a dial tone ringing in my ear. I leaned against the wall, powerless as tears finally poured out. The hospital corridor was empty at midnight, my sobs echoing raw and desolate.
I sounded new every half of it ring in my ear, and leaned against the wall, powerless as tears finally poured out. The hospital corridor was empty at midnight, my sobs echoing raw and desolate.
Early the next morning, the doctor found me, handing over a critical condition notice. EMS. Evelyn, your father's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Bone fragments in his spine are compressing the nerves. If we don't operate today, he may never walk again. He could even die. I held the thin sheet of paper, which felt like a ton of lead. My mother sat beside me, silent, tears streaming down her face. I knew she was suffering too, but her stubbornness had pushed our family to the brink. Mom, I said, my voice clinging to a final thread of hope. Call Julian. Tell him to give back the money, even part of it. Dad can't wait any longer. My mother shook her head, her eyes blurred with tears. Evelyn, I've tried. He won't answer. Just then, my phone rang an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Is this Ms. Evelyn Thorne? A deep male voice asked, thick with a Mexican accent. This is she. Who's calling? A friend of Julian's, the man said, his words slurred. He owes us $30,000 in gambling debts. He's hiding. We heard your family has money. Pay it off and we'll leave him alone. My heart sank. Of course, Julian had gambled again. I don't have any money, I said wearily. My father's in critical condition in the hospital. All our savings were stolen by Julian to gamble. Surgery? The man sneered. That's your problem. If we don't get the money by tomorrow, we'll find Julian, and when we do, there's no guarantee he'll come back alive. He hung up. I collapsed onto the chair, icy cold all over. My father's life on one side, my brother's safety on the other. What could I do? My mother had clearly heard the call. She jumped up, grabbing my hand. Evelyn, we have to save Julian. He can't die. What about Dad? I stared at her, my heart numb. Does he deserve to die? Mom, wake up. Julian's a bottomless pit. You'll never fill his greed. Save him this time and he'll only get worse. All these years you've ignored Dad's hardships, ignored my feelings for him. Isn't that enough? But he's my son. My mother screamed through tears. I can't lose him. Then you can lose Dad? I cried too. Dad worked his whole life for this family, hard, frugal, never living for himself. What has Julian ever done besides take? Mom, you're so biased, it's heartbreaking. We argued fiercely in the hospital corridor, drawing a crowd. I knew I was making a scene, but I couldn't hold back anymore. All the grievances, anger, and disappointment I'd bottled up for years exploded in that moment. Just then, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the corridor, Mr. Ricardo, my father's boss. A Mexican man in his 50s, he'd always been kind to my father. I'd seen him hand my father a bottle of water on the worksite, saying, Old Thorne, don't push yourself too hard, health comes first. Evelyn, how's your father? Mr. Ricardo asked, walking over, his face filled with concern. I wiped my tears, choking on my words. Mr. Ricardo, he needs surgery right away, but we don't have the money. Mr. Ricardo sighed, pulling a check from his pocket. This is $50,000. It's all I can spare. Use it for the surgery. Your father's a good worker, honest, hardworking. Last typhoon, everyone else hid, but he risked his life to reinforce the site's barriers, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. A man like that doesn't deserve to be abandoned by fate. I stared at the check, tears streaming down my face. Thank you, Mr. Ricardo, thank you so much. I couldn't say anything else. In our darkest hour, a man with no blood ties to us had reached out, and kindness more touching than family. You're welcome, Mr. Ricardo said, patting my shoulder. Tell your father to pay me back slowly when he's better. Right now, saving his life is what matters. My mother cried too, thanking Mr. Ricardo repeatedly. I grabbed the check and rushed to find the doctor arranging the surgery. Watching my father being wheeled into the operating room, a huge weight lifted from my chest. The surgery lasted 6 hours and it was a success. The doctor said my father was recovering well. With proper rehabilitation, he'd walk again. In the weeks that followed, I balanced caring for my father with working overtime. My mother took 2 part-time jobs, washing dishes late into the night, her hands covered in thick calluses. She never mentioned Julian again, never gave him another cent. Once, watching a video of Dad's rehabilitation, she said softly, I was so stupid. I made my son my whole world, forgetting the people who truly love me. Julian came looking for us a few times after that. He walked with a crutch, his leg twisted and deformed, broken by debt collectors. He knelt outside the hospital, begging for forgiveness, saying he was desperate, begging for one more chance. I looked at his pitiful state, feeling no sympathy. He'd stolen more than Dad's lifeline. He'd stolen the trust and warmth of our family. I chased him away, saying, You made your bed, now lie in it. Later, I heard he'd been forced into drug trafficking by gangsters after failing to pay his debts. He'd been shot and killed in a police raid a few weeks earlier, his body found in a dumpster on the outskirts of town. When my mother heard the news, she was silent for a long time, then said, It's fate. The day my father was discharged, the sun was shining brightly. He walked slowly out of the hospital with a cane, a long-absent smile on his face. Evelyn, you've been through so much, he said, taking my hand, his eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry I never gave you a better life, that you suffered so much. Dad, don't say that. I smiled. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. My mother stood beside us, tears in her eyes. She stepped forward, taking my hand. Evelyn, I'm sorry, I was so foolish. From now on, we'll be a family together forever. I nodded, tears flowing again. This time they were tears of happiness. The sound of the monitor faded away, replaced by the laughter of our small family. I knew the road ahead would be long. We'd have to work hard to pay off the debt to help Dad recover, but I believed that as long as we stuck together, we could overcome anything. Through this ordeal, I finally understood. Family isn't about one-sided sacrifice or indulgence. It's about mutual support, cherishing each other. True family love has nothing to do with gender or blood ties. It's about standing up for each other in crisis, having the courage to admit mistakes, and never giving up on one another, even in despair. Mr. Ricardo's kindness showed me the warmth of human nature, and my parents' transformation helped us rediscover the strength of family. Some family bonds may be tested by hardship, misunderstanding, and hurt, but as long as there's love and responsibility in our hearts, we can always find our way back to warmth.